You've met someone and felt it instantly, the pause before they speak, the way their eyes hold on an idea just a moment longer than the world seems to allow. You don't know their history, but you know the terrain. There's a certain stillness to their presence, as though thought itself has settled into the air between you. In that stillness, a quiet recognition stirs. Not that you've met before, but that your minds move according to the same hidden map. It begins with an almost imperceptible shift, the moment when the noise of the world fades, and you notice the presence of another mind that seems to breathe in rhythm with your own. They do not rush to fill the silence. They do not look away when thought takes longer than speech. There is something in their cadence, in the way they carry an idea, that feels both foreign and familiar. You cannot name it yet, but you feel it, an architecture beneath the words, a pattern running parallel to your own. Carl Jung once wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." In these moments, transformation begins not with action, but with recognition. This is the unspoken kinship of certain introverted types: INFJ, INTJ, INFP, INTP. Four letters that, on the surface, belong to different portraits. Yet beneath those portraits lies a shared interior weather, slow-moving currents of abstraction, a pull toward the unseen threads connecting events, a tendency to turn inward, not to escape the world, but to understand it. Their days may look different on the outside, but each moves through life with an invisible compass, orienting not by landmarks everyone can see, but by patterns and meanings only they seem to notice. INFJs and INTJs move through this landscape guided by introverted intuition, convergent, distilling, drawn to the single, elegant through line. INFPs and INTPs navigate with extroverted intuition, divergent, exploratory, gathering possibilities before choosing which to carry forward. But here, in the quiet space of recognition, the difference matters less than the fact that each is scanning for meaning beyond the obvious. You may meet them in a crowded room, where their eyes drift toward the edges rather than the center. You may find them in the quiet of a library aisle, fingertips grazing the spine of a book, as though listening for the hum of the right idea. Perhaps it happens in the pause before a meeting begins, where their gaze lingers in a way that feels both watchful and inward at once. Wherever it happens, the recognition is subtle but certain. The conversation may be brief, the connection immediate and oddly steady, as though it had been there all along, waiting for the right moment to surface. It is not that you think the same thoughts, more that you inhabit the same kind of landscape. A place where meaning is gathered slowly, distilled until it holds shape and weight, where the unseen is taken as seriously as the visible, where an idle moment is never truly idle, because the mind is always moving, sifting, comparing, searching for the thread that makes the present moment part of something larger. For these four types, the act of noticing patterns is not a pastime. It is the ground they walk on, the lens through which reality becomes legible. An overheard sentence can spark a cascade of connections that stretch years into the past or future. A fleeting expression can become the key to understanding an entire relationship. And in those rare moments when you find someone else walking the same ground, it feels less like meeting and more like remembering that this terrain exists and that you are not the only one who knows its contours. But there is something else in that recognition too. An unspoken question, tucked quietly between the ease of familiarity and the caution of difference. If we share this way of seeing, what else might we share? And perhaps more unsettling, what fractures might be hidden in a mind that feels so much like mine? This is where the journey begins, in the silent acknowledgement that sameness is never complete, and that even in kinship, the map will lead us down different paths. If you've felt this, stay with me. The shape of the pattern is about to come into focus. The first moments of recognition are fleeting. But if you stay, if you listen, you begin to see the structure beneath them. What first felt like a single thread starts to reveal itself as part of a larger weave, recurring gestures, similar ways of framing a thought, a shared comfort in letting a silence stretch just long enough to hold meaning. Carl Jung observed, "In all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder, a secret order." For these four types, INFJ, INTJ, INFP, INTP, that secret order is not something they chase so much as something they inhabit. Their perception bends naturally toward coherence, toward finding the invisible lattice that connects moments, ideas, and people. Here is where their overlap is clearest. All four share an intuitive lens, whether convergent, nigh, or divergent, nay, that treats experience as raw material for pattern making. The INFJ and INTJ, led by nigh, narrow the field, drawing multiple impressions into one distilled insight. The INFP and INTP, led by nay, widen the field, generating multiple interpretations before choosing one to pursue. Different motions, yes, but both driven by the same gravitational pull toward meaning. You can see it in how they process a story. The INFJ will listen, eyes focused, then offer a conclusion that feels like the endpoint of an invisible equation. The INTJ will hear the same details and translate them into a framework, a strategic placement in the broader system they see unfolding. The INFP might drift into associations, linking the story to a half-remembered poem or a personal value that rises to the surface. The INTP will test the internal logic, running it against other models until it either holds or collapses. Four approaches, one impulse, to make the unclear clear. When this shared pattern seeking is mirrored back to them, something in the psyche relaxes. It is a rare relief to find someone who doesn't need to be convinced that a passing detail could be the hinge of a much larger door. It is equally rare to find someone who knows when to leave a mystery intact. And yet, this is also where the first differences surface. Nigh users, INFJ and INTJ, often see the broad spread of nay users as scattered, while nay users, INFP and INTP, may see nigh's focus as narrow to the point of missing possibilities. Both perspectives are true in their way. The challenge is remembering that the other's approach is not a flaw, but the other half of a map you can't draw alone. Reflect for a moment. When you encounter a different way of pattern making, do you see it as a distortion of your own clarity or as an invitation to expand it? Do you feel curiosity or defensiveness? Because for these four types, the instinct to seek structure can become a point of connection or a point of quiet fracture. In the best cases, it becomes a bridge, nigh offering depth to nay's breadth, nay offering breadth to nigh's depth. In the worst, it becomes a wall, each side convinced the other has missed the real picture. If recognition was the first step, this is the second. Learning that the pattern you see is not the only one worth following. If you want to keep exploring these overlaps, the ways they connect and the ways they divide, quietly tap like and subscribe. That way, the next layer will find you when it's ready. Recognition can feel like a door swinging open. Collapse is when it closes, sometimes slowly, sometimes in a single, jarring slam. For the introverted intuitives, collapse often comes when the shared sense of pattern turns into evidence of difference. The similarity that once felt like kinship begins to reveal its fault lines. Carl Jung warned, "We cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses." But when a connection rests on the belief that the other sees as you do, discovering that they don't can feel like betrayal. This is where the 9A divide sharpens. INFJs and INTJs, led by Nye, may feel that Nay's branching explorations dilute the truth, introducing too much noise into the signal. INFPs and INTPs, led by Nay, may feel that Nye's narrowing excludes possibilities that could change the entire picture. The very function that draws them together, the drive to map meaning, becomes the wedge that pushes them apart. The INFJ may retreat into the certainty of their internal narrative, leaning on Fey to interpret the other's divergence as a sign of emotional misalignment. The INTJ might double down on Tay efficiency, discarding approaches they deem impractical. The INFP, guided by Phi, could feel personally invalidated, withdrawing to protect their authenticity. The INTP, anchored in Tai, may grow skeptical and dismissive, reducing the other's vision to a flaw in reasoning. 4 different cognitive defenses, all triggered by the same moment, when the pattern you thought you shared is not the pattern they see. You might notice it in conversation, the subtle cooling when you follow a thread they abandoned, or the quickness with which they shift away from the thread you're holding. You might feel it in your body, the tightening in the chest, the impulse to argue, the quiet ache of realizing that we was always conditional. The danger here is not the difference itself. It is the assumption that one style of pattern making is superior. Nye's convergent precision can feel like a scalpel, exact but limited to the area it cuts. Nay's divergent spread can feel like sunlight, expansive but sometimes too diffuse to focus heat. Each has its shadow. Nye can become rigid, unwilling to reopen a closed conclusion. Nay can become restless, unwilling to settle on any conclusion at all. Reflect for a moment. When someone challenges the way you connect the dots, do you listen long enough to see their picture, or only long enough to sharpen your own? Do you protect your vision, or do you let it breathe? Collapse is not failure. It is the point at which the illusion of sameness gives way to the truth of difference. For these 4 types, that truth can be unsettling, but it is also where the possibility for deeper connection begins. Not in the agreement that we see the same thing, but in the respect that we see differently and both views matter. If this feels uncomfortably familiar, stay with me. The next step is learning what to do with the distance you now see. When the dust of collapse settles, there is a silence that is not emptiness, but possibility. At first, it feels strange, the absence of urgency, the absence of the need to defend your way of seeing. Slowly, you begin to notice what remains when the heat has cooled, fragments of the pattern that still hold, even after disagreement. Some are small, a phrase that still rings true, an image that still carries meaning. Others are larger, more structural, the kind of insights that survive precisely because they were tested. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Reflection is this act of making conscious, not in the fever of discovery, but in the calm that comes after a rupture. It is the difference between chasing the horizon and watching the shoreline reappear after a storm. For INFJs, this often means drawing Faye back from judgment and letting Nye quietly test the story without the pressure to make it serve someone's emotional needs. For INTJs, it means calling on Tay not to win an argument, but to check whether their Nye vision can withstand evidence they once resisted. For INFPs, Phi begins to soften, allowing Nay to revisit interpretations they may have discarded too quickly. For INTPs, Tai pauses its deconstruction long enough for Nay to consider perspectives that logic alone could not generate. Here, the work is not to rebuild the shared pattern exactly as it was, but to see which pieces deserve to be carried forward, and which were artifacts of projection, habit, or pride. You might find that a disagreement sharpened the core truth, trimming away what was sentimental excess. You might find that you mistook your own longing for a universal fact. You may even find that what you thought was the heart of the matter was only the wrapping. Reflection also exposes the role of the shadow. Nye users may realize how easily they can confuse elegance with accuracy. Nay users may notice their tendency to privilege novelty over stability. Both may need to ask, am I holding onto this interpretation because it is true or because it feels like mine? The question is uncomfortable, but so is growth. This stage requires patience. You may feel the pull to reassert your position, to prove you were right all along. But reflection asks for a different posture, to let the truth, however small, reveal itself without being forced. It is in this openness that trust, in yourself and in the other, can begin to regrow. Sometimes that trust will be mutual. Sometimes it will be yours alone, a quiet decision not to close the door entirely. The gift of reflection is not agreement, but clarity. Agreement is fragile. Clarity can endure. Once you know the shape of your own perception, you can hold it without needing to impose it. Once you can see the contours of someone else's, you can respect it without needing to adopt it. And sometimes you realize that the two shapes, yours and theirs, fit together in ways you hadn't imagined before the break. Consider this. When you think about the last time a disagreement shifted your perspective, was it because someone convinced you, or because the space between you allowed you to see more? And if you could revisit that moment now, what would you see that you missed before? Reflection is not an endpoint. It is a recalibration. It is what allows the next meeting of minds to be less about defending ground and more about walking it together. If this part of the map feels familiar, I want to hear from you. Share the moment when you learned more from the space between you than from the agreement itself. Integration is not about erasing the differences. It's about walking forward while carrying them without resentment. After recognition, after collapse, after reflection, the question shifts. How do I live with this awareness without letting it harden into distance? Viktor Frankl wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response." Integration lives in that space. The pause between what has happened and how you decide to move toward or away from someone after it. It's a space you learn to inhabit slowly until choosing differently feels less like effort and more like instinct. For INFJs, integration often means keeping Faye open enough to feel others without letting it override Nye's clarity. It's a quieter, more deliberate form of empathy, one that sets boundaries while still choosing connection. For INTJs, it's letting Tay revise the plan when new evidence or values emerge without treating change as defeat. For INFPs, it's allowing Phi to coexist with perspectives that don't mirror their own, trusting Nay's openness to prevent isolation. For INTPs, it's letting Tai precision live alongside possibilities that cannot be proven yet, but still hold potential. In this stage, Naidoms learn to give their conclusions room to breathe, to be reshaped without losing coherence. Nadoms learn to let some possibilities rest, to anchor their ideas in lived experience. Both learn that the other's strength can act as a stabilizer, not a threat. Integration changes the way you move through shared space. A conversation is no longer a contest of perspectives, but a meeting of them. You begin to hear the other's metaphors as invitations instead of detours. You start to see their focus, whether narrow or wide, as the necessary balance to your own. The air between you feels less like a boundary and more like a shared field where different seeds can take root. You also notice the small ways trust is rebuilt. The INFJ pausing before interpreting. The INTJ asking for input without pre-deciding the answer. The INFP entertaining a framework they once would have dismissed. The INTP holding a possibility without dissecting it to death. Each shift is subtle, but the sum of them changes the texture of the connection. The old impulse to retreat or dominate softens into a willingness to remain in the room when it would once have felt easier to leave. The challenge here is not to idealize integration. You will still disagree. You will still misunderstand each other. But the disagreements no longer carry the same weight of threat. You have learned that the pattern does not have to be identical for it to be shared. Sometimes it is the friction itself that keeps the connection alive. Ask yourself, when you think of the people whose differences you've learned to live with, what allowed you to cross that distance? Was it their effort, yours, or the slow work of time? And how has that crossing changed you in ways you did not expect? Integration is not the absence of conflict. It's the decision to keep the bridge open even when the wind is high. It's the quiet confidence that you can meet again without starting from zero, and that the map between you, though imperfect, is worth preserving. If something in this feels like a reminder you didn't know you needed, keep going. The final step is not about the map at all, but about how you walk it. Return is not about forgetting the journey. It's about carrying what you've learned into the places that once felt ordinary. You step back into the familiar streets, the familiar rooms, but the way you move through them has shifted. The conversations at the coffee shop, the commute you've taken 100 times, even the pause in a hallway before a meeting, they all hold a slightly different weight. You notice what you would have missed before, but you no longer feel compelled to turn every detail into a message. Marcel Proust wrote, "The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes." The return is the quiet trust that you no longer need to chase meaning in order to find it, because the eyes you carry back with you are already changed. You no longer scan every moment for hidden significance, but when it does appear, you can meet it without clutching at it. It's a slower breath, a softer gaze, a willingness to let the moment be enough. For INFJs, this means letting Faye engage naturally with others without the constant weight of interpreting every interaction for deeper purpose. For INTJs, it's allowing Tay to focus on action without needing every move to fit the long-term design perfectly. For INFPs, it's letting Phi guide them toward what feels right in the moment, even if it's not part of a grand pattern. For INTPs, it's letting Ty explore ideas without having to map every conclusion back to an overarching theory. For INTPs, this is also where Say Inferior finally has room to breathe, noticing the color of the light in the room, the taste of a meal, the sound of rain against the window, without needing to fold it into a larger story. For NADOMs, the return softens the restless scanning, allowing them to anchor in what's directly in front of them without losing their openness. In the return, NIDOMs find they can still see the long arc, but they no longer feel the urgency to force it into place. NADOMs still spot the branching possibilities, but they no longer feel the pull to chase everyone. There's a softening of the grip, not a loss of vision, but a gentler relationship to it. The map is still there, but it is folded, tucked into a pocket, ready when needed, but not pressed into your hands. This is where the journey's work is tested, in the marketplace conversation that could spiral into misunderstanding, but doesn't, because you've learned to let some differences remain unresolved. In the passing remark that might once have consumed your thoughts for days, but now drifts through you, acknowledged but unburdened. In the moment of recognition that comes and goes, without demanding you follow it. You may still encounter moments of deep connection, the shared glance in a crowded space, the sentence that lands with uncanny accuracy, but they no longer demand that you rewrite your path. You can let them be gifts instead of assignments. Sometimes you take them with you, other times you leave them where they appeared, trusting that their purpose was simply to be noticed. The return is also where integration becomes sustainable. The bridge you built in Part 5 is now part of the landscape, not something you have to maintain consciously every day, but a path you can take without hesitation when the need arises. It's the knowledge that connection doesn't require constant proof to remain alive. Ask yourself, in your daily life, where could you allow more of this looseness? Where could you let meaning appear without demanding it serve a plan? And if you did, what might that free you to notice instead? You've walked the shared ground, seen the fractures, rebuilt the trust. Now, the work is to live as though the map is always with you, not in your hand, but in your way of seeing. It is a quiet kind of mastery, knowing the terrain well enough to walk it without needing to trace every line. If this journey through the shared and divided terrain of INFJs, INTJs, INFPs, and INTPs has shifted something in you, share it with someone who walks a similar path. And if you want to keep exploring the undercurrents of these types, subscribe. The next conversation will be waiting when you're ready to return to it. And so, we return to where we began, to that moment when the noise fades, and you notice the presence of another mind moving in rhythm with your own. You've walked the terrain now, seen its shared pathways and its fracture lines, felt the weight of the bridges and the quiet of the spaces between them. Perhaps the person who sparked that recognition is still in your life. Perhaps they are only a memory. Either way, they remain a point on your inner map, a place where you learned that similarity is never complete and that difference does not always mean distance. The journey between INFJs, INTJs, INFPs, and INTPs is not about perfect alignment. It's about learning how the patterns touch without needing them to merge entirely. It's about carrying the shared ground forward without erasing the contours that make each mind its own. You will still meet the moments, the glance across a crowded room, the unexpected phrase that stops you mid-step. But now, you will meet them with steadier hands. You no longer need to claim them, define them, or follow them to the edges of your energy. You can let them pass through, leaving only the quiet warmth of recognition. The real map was never the diagrams, the functions, or the names. It was the way you learned to walk, aware of the connections underfoot, unafraid of the spaces between them. And when the next moment comes, when another pair of eyes meets yours and you feel that invisible thread tighten, you'll know you've been here before. You know the way forward, and you can choose to walk it, not because you must, but because you want to.